overseeing some of that process and helping to facilitate it with the end goal in mind of our students' achievement at school. How do we help facilitate and support the faculty and staff there at Waimea Canyon? How do we get our community members, parents, families involved in participating in meeting and reaching those goals? So the agenda here before you on the screen, can you still see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so the agenda on the screen here, just to call this meeting officially to order. And I apologize, I did not see who is on the meeting with us. I'm hoping that somebody is here to take meeting minutes to record this meeting. It looks like
I'm actually recording the meeting, and I'm also pushing it live to Facebook.
Thank you very much. So we'll call this meeting officially to order at 6:02 p.m. For introductions, I wanted to take a moment to do really brief and quick introductions for those that don't know all the faces and names that might be involved as stakeholders at Waimea Canyon. First, the School Community Council, myself, I'm the chair of the council. We have a parent representative that I see here, Ryan Oyama, if you could introduce yourself. He probably wasn't prepared for that.
I was not prepared. Hi, I'm Ryan.
I apologize.
I was in 8th grade, and we will have a daughter starting in August.
Thanks for being here, Ryan. And I think right now, due to this weather, possibly, who knows, we don't have other members available and have joined us yet. Maybe they'll join late. For Waimea Canyon Middle School faculty and staff, we have our principal. Melissa, if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, good evening. I'm Melissa Speechens, and I'm the principal at Waimea Canyon Middle School. Thanks for coming tonight.
And we have Julia Diegman, who is our PCNC.
Hello, everybody.
I think you've met her. We also have Waimea Canyon Middle School PTSA, and that is led by Kelly Dolensap, who is also with us.
Hi, everybody. Happy to be here.
And finally, our guest speaker, author of Making It. We're happy to have her. Stephanie, if you would please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Lynn, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Stephanie Malia, you can call me Malia, and I am here, but on a Zoom screen with you, which is so frustrating that the weather didn't cooperate today. So I'm beaming in not from my basement, but from Waimea Plantation Cottages. So I'm sending lots of aloha to you across your community. But it's so good to be back and to see familiar faces now, to think that we've been together a few times in the last year. And I'm excited for, hopefully the internet will hold out. I am connected by my phone right now. The internet here in the cottages is not working. So I'm really hopeful that I'll be able to get you updated on things in a little while.
Thank you, Stephanie. So just so you can put some faces to names, very briefly, I just want to share, because I think there's awareness of SCC, but maybe not enough. So who, what, why, where, and how? What is it that SCC does? And I'll be honest, before I ever learned about SCC, I had no idea what it was or that it even existed. So who are we? We're a bunch of stakeholders. So it's made up of school folks, which are teachers, principals, the administration and the school staff. And then the rest of us on the other side in the community, which is the parents, the families, the friends, the community members, the students. All those voices are important in shaping the environment for our school and also supporting our students' achievement there. What do we do? Well, as the key stakeholders, we have a voice. The opportunity is presented to us through SCC to have our voice be heard and for us to be able to provide input and share the concerns or, ideas and, certainly opportunities for improvement or maybe completely brand new out of the box thinking ideas that have not been presented. So we want to hear from and have our participation from our communities and families and parents that and see that become available in our schools. So we need your voice. Why was it established? The Reinventing Education Act of 2004 created SCCs. It's a mandate. It's required by the DOE, the BOE, which is, I didn't know what all those acronyms were before, Department of Education, Board of Education, had no idea they existed because I am not somebody that has a educational background in that way. So those are all the reasons SCC exists, so that there is community participation and we have an impact and say and voice, as I mentioned, in how our school operates and functions and supports our children's education. Where and how? Well, we meet monthly, virtually, sometimes in person when we can, as we are supposed to today. We follow the SCC handbook. There's an entire activities checklist and timeline that we follow that guide us through the process of things that we should be doing to support our school. So take a look at the SCC webpage. There's the entire year's schedule of meetings there, all the links, a bunch of other information, all of our meeting minutes, agendas that we've had in the past, and any other resources. But if ever there's a question about SCC, please don't hesitate to reach out to any one of us, either at Waimea Canyon Middle School, Ms. Spejans, or myself, and any other members. Hope that kind of gives you an overview. So again, the reason we have this community meeting is for that opportunity to present an academic and financial plan for your review and input. It was intended that when you attended in person, that you'd be able to have a handout of these plans because they're very detailed. There's lots and lots of words on them. So there is going to be a link in this slide, and I'm not sure how else to share it. I'm hoping that there might be a way, maybe Julia, if you have any suggestions on how I can share it, maybe in the chat.
Yes, I would put it in the chat.
Okay, fantastic. Then that'll give you an opportunity to kind of see what I mean by all the words and the way that it's shaped based on the new CAS and the requirements for how these priorities are shaped for the academic plan. But this provides the community an opportunity to review it, discuss it, ask questions, and give your input. Tell us what you want to see on these things, and understand also what the entire staff and SCC have already reviewed and approved. So one last thing I want to say about SCC is next year's nominations and elections. It happens annually for every position, and it has to be a 50-50% representation on both sides. In other words, 50% school and 50% community. So 50% is made up of a teacher, a staff member, and admin. And the other side is a student's voice, a parent's voice, and a community voice. It has to be equal on both sides so that there's fair and equal representation of Waimea Canyon Middle School. So we hold this election every year. We're nominating every single one of those roles. They're typically 1 or 2 year terms. And right now, I think they're all 2-year terms. So it goes through a voting process after the nominations are are received, I should say. And as I mentioned, students, parents, community members, Waimea Canyon Middle School teachers, admin is already a role. So we have one principal, so we don't have to nominate an elector. So we're good there. And then staff, any Waimea Canyon Middle School staff. This is just sort of a brief, wordy description of, as a member, this is what you do. And what I'll do is certainly provide this PowerPoint to be posted on the Waimea Canyon Middle School SCC webpage. There's a flyer, there's a QR code there. If you see your screen, you can nominate anyone you can think of, whether be it a student, a teacher, somebody that is in the community that you know would have an interest. We have currently a community member on SCC who does not have a student at the school. Actually, we have 2, and they just have an interest in our school's future achievement and how it's shaping our students. So it's just wonderful to see that. Again, this flyer is posted on the webpage, so feel free to visit that and have a better copy that maybe you can scan easier. The
Then
timeline.
I'll just put it in the chat. People can.
Thank you.
put it in
Thank
the
you.
chat.
The timeline is Right now, we're accepting nominations until the end of this month. We'll hold elections and have a voting day in April. And we'll announce who was elected rather in April. And hopefully by our last meeting of this school year in May, for our last SCC meeting, we'll invite those newly elected members to attend at least the last meeting of this year, so that they're not brand new into the new year, but their official role won't commence until the first official meeting, SCC meeting of next school year. That gives an opportunity to do sort of introductions and right seat, left seat sort of stuff. Okay, so here are the links. Julia, I don't know if you have them. These are links to the academic plan and financial plan. Again, they have been reviewed by the staff at Waimea Canyon. The SCC has also reviewed this plan. We, as the SCC, have to sign off on a assurances form to say that we have reviewed this and we have gone over this with the principal, and also provide our recommendations, which I would love to hear of any other recommendations the community would have or may have, because I will include those recommendations in that form when we sign it. So this is an opportunity, and I'm going to hand it off to Melissa to speak to this and for any input that she has.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Originally, we had talked about, Lynn, that Malia would go first. Are you agreeable to that, and we do academic plan later, or do
Absolutely.
you want to stick on? Okay,
No, that's
great.
fine. That's fine. We can do this last. I apologize.
No. It's been changing all day long. Okay.
I get it. I get it. Look, did you see I just moved the slide up? So easy change, easy change. Okay, so we'll talk about that last. What I'll even try to do, though I don't know how helpful it'll be, is try to pull up the academic and financial plan. It's, again, honestly, there's so many words, so it's hard to take in. And in the meantime, while Stephanie is presenting, it gives me an opportunity to get those links to you, Julia, if you don't already have them. So to introduce again, Stephanie Malia Krauss, who's the author of Making It, to talk to us today about the profile of a Waimea Canyon Middle School graduate.
Thanks, Lynn. And so it seems like about half of you I have gotten to know, and maybe the other half are new to me. I can't see your faces for that other half, but that's what I'm guessing. So I may do a little bit of reflection of where we've been the past year before jumping in to where we're going. And I think hopefully one of the benefits potentially of doing the academic and financial plan after this is having this in mind as you're thinking about where you're heading academically and fiscally, and where there might be spaces of real alignment, and where there might be spaces where you'll want to come back and have conversation as the school moves in both directions, because you want that integration to be solid. So I just want to kind of flag that. I'm also excited to know that this third time together is happening in the space of your nomination cycle, because as you're thinking about new members to the SCC, this can be something that you talk about with them and, you know, really include in the conversations and think about the vital voice. So for those of you who haven't met me yet, the process we're about to talk about started with the PTSA and SCC and a conversation. That was the very first kickoff conversation outside of a book talk that was not connected to this project specifically. And so your voice was truly instrumental in getting this portrait started and designed and refined to the version that we'll see in a moment. So Lynn, if it's okay, I would love to be able to share my screen. Can we swap? I'm going to give you a little.
Absolutely. I think you should just be able to share, I'm hoping, if Julia has already provided the opportunity or extended the permission to share.
Yeah, we'll try it, and then you'll tell me if you see it should switch over. Do you see a timeline? Yeah. Okay, great. Perfect. All right, let me make sure I can still see you all. Give me a second. you can just look at my very excellent professional background of the kitchen at this cottage. Okay, so for those of you who are listening in, and I'm assuming there may be one or two people who can't see things visually. So I'm going to try to describe what people are seeing. And then Melissa, if it's possible to send out the link to the group after so that they can view the slides if they want to come back, that would be great. So the process that we've been working on together, a review for half of you, is that we've spent the last 8 to 10 months going through a process of trying to create an expanded vision of what the middle school experience can and should be at Waimea Canyon, what the purpose of middle school should be, and what the learning and developmental journey for students should be. And so the working kind of name for that is a portrait of a Waimea Canyon middle school learner. And so what that process has looked like, if you can't see the PowerPoint slides, is last spring, so almost a year ago, we had virtual and in-person meetings. Again, it started with you and then with the faculty. At that point, it was, coming out of the sort of craziness of COVID. And so some of it was taking stock of where we had been, how the staff were doing, what people were seeing as strengths and challenges and opportunities. And then also, really importantly, meeting with a group of almost alumni, outgoing 8th grade students, to reflect on what their experience had been, what they wished they had been able to do more of, that they got to do a little, what they loved doing, what changes they would want to see made in the middle school experience. Throughout last summer, there was the identification of 30 additional stakeholders beyond the SCC and PTSA, cultural leaders, political leaders, so your mayor, some of your elected officials, kumus, kupuna on the island, other additional family members and alumni, businesses, and they were interviewed about exactly what I said, the sort of theme of a portrait is. What should the middle school experience be? What kinds of experiences should students have? What are the skills and habits and values and mindsets that students should be able to learn and strengthen and sometimes master between 6th grade and 8th grade and more? So there was this wave of community conversations. And then this past year, there's been a level of synthesizing and coming up with what that might look like as a portrait. So I was here in December, got to see some of you. We did get that good in-person time, and we looked at developmental milestones of what middle schoolers should experience developmentally. We had a really rich conversation about that, how COVID changed things, how students are kind of growing up fast and slow. And then really digging in sort of outside of our first conversation as a collective here of Ohana and community and belonging and identity, to what actually should be the experiences that kids are having. What are the activities that they should be having? You might remember we talked a lot about clubs and electives and exploratory opportunities for students being really important. I did a similar thing. So for those of you who were there that night, you'll recall Melissa and I were just coming out of a conversation that Julia was present for, where it was real-time interviewing of the faculty, asking them the exact same questions that community members and students had been asked, and allowing each one of them to, in an anonymous way, weigh in themselves. So all of that information came to where we are today. So, a little less than a year in, we now have a more full portrait. This is what I would call pre-implementation. The purpose of today's conversation is to show you, to test how it feels after all of those conversations. And then the really hard work starts, which has to be owned by the school and the school bodies, which of course you're being core to that. I can only carry this process so far for you. Hopefully I'll be available to coach and support. But implementation comes next. How do we make this not only a framework, but actually an experience for kids, an experience that is internalized inside of the school and invested in by every staff person? So we're going to walk through that really quickly. And I want to check in Lynn and Melissa. So we're at 6:20 now. How much time do I have before we jump to the next slide? And when do I need to stop talking? I mean, I want to get feedback too. So I want to just know what is our time frame here?
Melissa, how much time do you need to cover? I guess it depends on how much Q&A there is for the academic and financial plans.
I would say I could, it's very hard to say because the plan, like you said, has so many words and so many expectations to it. I would say I could do a reasonable recap in 10 minutes.
Maybe 5 or 10 minutes for Q&A in case there is. Okay, so help me with math here. Maybe 20, 25 minutes or so, Stephanie?
Okay. Yeah. All right, we'll just jump in. Brevity is not my strength, but I work really hard at it. So I'll try to bring us through in a very speedy way. And then I think what's really important is just, again, Melissa, if we can get the link to everybody so that you can digest the words and really process through. And if there are any reactions after this meeting, to email Melissa, email me, so we can integrate this last wave of feedback before it's sort of green light on. So again, I think for listening now, it would be, does this feel reflective of both what we've said, but it should also be reflective of the other conversations I was having. But you are parents and community members who love and care for these kids. So is this the kind of middle school experience you would want to rally around and to push towards? The good news is the school's already doing a lot of great things inside of this portrait that we'll look at. They just aren't always connected. And so there are a lot of strengths to build on in terms of what's already here. Okay, so what you're looking at now, this first slide, some of you might remember the last time we were together, we went through the research on thriving. So we decided as a group that the purpose of the portrait was you wanted to see kids thrive in middle school and also in the future, that they're learning and thriving in middle school and they are prepared and able to learn and thrive after middle school. So these 5 indicators of thriving, so for people who may not be able to see, they're things like safe and supported, rooted and connected. Those are from the research, but the descriptions underneath are from you, are from all of those interviews and all of those conversations, which means it's fully contextualized to Waimea Canyon. So what would be important to know is if your North Star, if the goal of the portrait is students are thriving now and in the future, then these 5 things should be present in every classroom, in every relationship, school-wide. That's true for policies and practices too. So a next step for implementation would be looking at, to what degree is this happening or not happening? Where and when is it happening? How do we make sure it's happening more? Are we talking to students? Is there a way to maybe survey, I'm Kelly, I'm looking at you for this one. Like, is there a way to survey and do pulse checks with students on how they're feeling? And in what spaces in the middle school are these 5 things most present? This connects really deeply with social emotional learning. This connects really deeply to flourishing, to mental health supports. But the important thing for those of you who are really invested in academic excellence is it also connects to the science of learning and development. So this is a fully integrated piece. When these are present with kids, not only are they doing better emotionally and socially, they'll also be doing better academically. So that's the North Star, that's the goal. So I would encourage you, when you get the presentation, to look through the smaller font, because that's Waimea Canyon Community language. This is just to refresh. We're not going to go over it. We went over it in December, what the middle school developmental milestones are. So, I'm remembering Ryan and Julia, you both sort of weighing in on this of like, it's so helpful to be able to see this and to, think about what our kids are going through in this moment. So here is the graphic that was previewed for you all, but now it is firmed up with language. So one of the things that's really exciting about this is the visual of this portrait is like a woven basket. And I was describing what we were doing together to some colleagues on Molokai. And they said, it's like the Hawaiian value aho of thinking about the past, present, and future and weaving together. And I was thinking, Melissa, about the mission that's on the marquee in front of the school and knowing the past and navigating the future. So there's a really sort of high level connection to the mission and vision you already have at the school, to have this portrait that's like a woven basket of what are the strong things from the past, what are we presently doing, and who do we want to be in the future. So if you can't see the visual, there are 4 different pieces. They're all very interconnected. And what's important to know is these are the core values and questions that should be explored across the middle school journey. And when I think about this, I think about it from the end of 5th grade, pre-transition, to probably the end of the first semester of freshman year, that there is some overflow into from elementary school and into high school, where this would start and end. So across the middle school experience, from the time that they transition in to the time that they leave and transition to high school, the big questions that they should explore in class, through the school community, and through community connections and experiences are things like, the first one is sense of self and belonging. Who am I? What am I good at? Who is my ohana? Who are my people? Where do I belong? What does belonging feel like? And so this anchors in the Hawaiian value of kahua, of, what is my foundation? What's really exciting here is this idea that if you think about things that the school has done for a while, project-based learning, experiential learning, you can build a lot of that self-discovery into projects, into, when kids are given choice over what they're doing. Sense of community comes next. So this is about aloha and aina. Lynn, this makes me think of some of the first comments I heard from you, that very first conversation, right? Reflecting on when you moved here and what you've learned raising your kids and grandkids here. And this is like, where am I from? What's my, where do I belong in a broader sense? Where do I experience community? What is this community here? In the school? What is this community in my family? What is this community on the west side in Hawaii? And Hawaii, there's sort of a rippling out. But that sense of community, so a lot of connection to this community and land and to each other shows up here. You'll see in a moment that connects to values and skills like compassion and empathy, community mindedness. So that's coming next. The next piece is sense of place. So I think about this like, what is my connection to this island in the ocean? And what is my connection all the way up to this island in the universe? So it goes from local to global. And do kids have a sense of place and a sense of responsibility to local all the way to global? So again, you think about that journey from 6th to 8th grade. It could be that journey starts local and that it expands to global, and it just kind of gets deeper and deeper and reinforces. One of the things to think about is, especially as parents, for those of you who are parents with kids in the school right now, and for those of you who don't know me, I am also a middle school mom. I've got a middle schooler myself, so I'm with you. I'm with you in this stage. But the developmental piece of not only identity, but what are the things I believe in? What are the things that are important to me? Is very fundamental in this particular period. And kids are very impressionable in this period. So the last one is that we know that there are students who are getting to high school and they're not ready academically and practically. So life skill wise, right? And academic skills. We also know that there are some really serious mental health challenges that students are having, and that one of the best protective factors for mental health is having a sense of purpose. There's a reason for me being here. There's meaning to my learning. There's meaning to my life. And I'm ready. I'm ready for whatever is going to get thrown my way. So the last piece is Juliana and Kwana Ike, but it's really around, what am I good at? What gives me joy in life? And so a lot of this is exploration, but also, so I think about this as sort of connection to things that they're good at and enjoy that bring them joy and learning, but also competence in the ways that they need to be competent to be ready for that next step. So you can see, if you think about this again as a braided basket, that if kids are showing up and they don't have a sense of community, how that will impact their ability to belong or sense of purpose or preparedness. There's a relationship there. Often as schools, we focus a lot on preparedness. And there are pieces that really get left out. With the INA-based education that does happen with the school's community partnerships, there's some really good things happening on this sense of place, which is great. I think that Waimea Canyon has a really excellent counseling staff, and the ability to cross-train between counselors and teachers is an amazing and necessary opportunity, because counselors just can't see everybody. And there has to be that cross-training piece. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take it deeper. So that's the highest level. Here are these sort of driving questions that should inform the entire middle school journey, from the time they enter to the time they exit. So now we're going to drop down to, like, what does that mean students are developing and strengthening? What kinds of experiences and activities should they have? What's the connection to culture? And what topics that aren't necessarily classes were lifted up to focus on? So if we were on the mainland, this slide would probably be called student competencies. It's skill sets, mindsets, values. In speaking with cultural leaders, in speaking with folks here, multiple times heard the use of the word gifts. How do we talk to kids about what their gifts are? And having this sort of gift-based language. So I just wanted to offer that to you as feedback that I think is really important. So for those of you who can't see the slides, what this slide shows are skills that are important for life, for learning, for future of work. These are important employability skills, adult skills. They're sometimes hard to measure, though, and they don't always connect directly to academics. But they do improve learning in immense ways. And so it'll be a task that will require parent and community buy-in to say, yes, we think that these skills, things like self-caring coping skills, empathy, communication skills, interpersonal skills, executive functioning skills, are important for the learning and development of our kids, and it's worth staff getting professional development around and prioritizing. So if you can't see this, under each of those sections, sense of self and belonging, sense of community, sense of place, and sense of purpose and preparedness, there are a couple of high-level skills. Now, for those of you who've been with me now a few times, you'll remember these skills were really a part of our conversations too. So they're backed up by science and they're backed up by our conversations of what do we want to see kids developing and practicing. There is such a huge, again, you've got such a resource having Kelly here because I'm just assuming, Kelly, you'll be able to tap into the research to show there's plenty of evidence and research on how this is good for kids and good for their academics. And what happens in the school community when these things are present. And speaking as a mom, how much better your kids feel about life and school and their future when they're developing these pieces. So I think this is a pretty solid list. What you don't see reflected here, just only in a bullet, is content knowledge. So this is not the standards. This is the experience of what they're developing holistically. The next piece are what are the experiences and activities that came out of all these conversations as most important, that help to build those student gifts and help to answer those big questions. So again, if you can't see the slides, they're the 4 sections: sense of self and belonging, sense of community, sense of place, sense of purpose and preparedness. The things that I'll call out, if you can't see the slide, that showed up again and again and again, is supporting things like exploratory and interest-based opportunities, whether those are through clubs or electives or school projects, after school opportunities. When I look at the data of all the conversations, a big takeaway for me is how does the school bring its walls down to get kids out into community? And how does it keep those walls down to invite community into the school? How do you really prioritize? And this is the perfect group to talk to this about. How do you really prioritize and invest resources, time, finance, everything else into school community partnerships? You have so many assets in this community and on this island, and people who want to be doing more and showing up. So there are a couple of things here that I just want to flag that are my own personal recommendations to consider. I think that a focus on school community partnerships is really important. I think that continuing to invest deeply in ways Melissa has been doing for years in experiential and project-based learning, very important. And I think that opportunities around electives and clubs or other rotating experiences, field trips, anything that's giving kids exposure and exploratory opportunities is also really important. A through line here is, again, kids going out into community, community coming into the school. Those are pieces that were very, very strong. So we can always come back to this. Okay, so there's 2 more layers here. On the cultural connection side, no matter what, you can't lose sight of where you are. You're in a very culturally rich place. And that's not just Hawaiian culture, right? That's the entire fusion of what makes Hawaii, Hawaii. I mean, I'm looking at this call and knowing pieces of folks' family backgrounds and other things at this point too. It's reflected in this call. It's reflected in your community. So you'll see that this layer of cultural connection this is one of the strongest assets you have, is the cultural vibrance of this place and the diversity that shows up on this island, residents or otherwise. And so it's a balance of how do you really connect kids to community mentors and cultural practitioners and cultural exchanges, and also prioritize inclusion and respect for other cultures, learning about other cultures. Sometimes we call this windows and mirrors. Mirrors is I see myself reflected, right, in this book or in this project. And a window is I'm learning about a culture that is different from my own. So field trips, how could they Zoom? We know how to Zoom now. Could they Zoom with global leaders? Melissa, I think about the What Schools Could Be community, how many international schools are a part of that? Could they talk to kids who are at different American schools, around the country, allowing kids to learn as much about their own genealogy. There's all kinds of things that you can go into, but because you live in a place where culture is important and prioritized already, and learning Hawaiian culture is prioritized and important already, I think you should lean into it because it's, again, a very important factor for learning and development. So the last piece to flag for you then are topics that came up in conversations to be covered that aren't necessarily classes specifically. And for those of you who can't see the slide, I'm just going to read off a couple of them. So again, every one of these slides, for those of you who can't see this, are organized in those same 4 buckets: sense of self and belonging, sense of community, sense of place, sense of purpose. So some of the topics in students building their sense of self and belonging are, what are their personal ethics? What is their kind of inner constitution of things that they believe? Mental health. So they do mental health first aid training for adults. They also do it for teens, and it can be free or it can be grant covered. So that would be something that you could think about. There are some very specific classes or seminars or one day things or things that could be incorporated into classes. On the sense of community side, so again, the values are aloha and aina. Conflict resolution. So when I was in social work school, I actually took a 1-credit class on conflict resolution. So it's something that can be taught. But if you think about the school and some of the cultural school climate issues that happen in any middle school, and including Waimea Canyon, teaching healthy conflict resolution and mediation skills can be deeply empowering. Those should be restorative. So how do they focus on restoring the relationship? And, restorative and with accountability. On sense of place, climate change, especially for this island, where you are, tied to that, sustainability and conservation, current events comes up there. For a sense of purpose, things like public speaking and personal finance, that, the life skills piece. Career options. So how are you, Waimea High School is a career pathways high school increasingly. So how are you using middle school to, again, expose and explore. So when I think about I always tend to alliterate because I used to teach 5th grade, and that's what you do when you teach elementary school. But when I think about the middle school experience, exposure and exploration are 2 fundamental pieces. And then again, the sort of identity. Who am I? What am I good at? Where do I belong? Who are my people? That's the 3rd piece of that. So, Lynn, I have no idea how I did on time there. Have I blown through all of it? Or do we still have a minute or 2 for questions? Okay, so I don't know, of those of you who aren't sharing video, I just assumed at least one of you couldn't see the slides. But for those of you who can, I can pop around on the slide deck if there are specific ones that you want to go to. I'm just going to go to the front here. So I would love to get a pulse check from you as I was walking through this, talking through it, and you were seeing how you're feeling about this, because the next step again would be, we want to do this. We want this to be the galvanized vision of, we want to make modifications on this trip, anything that still needs to be adjusted and considered. But we're very close to the version that then needs to be internally adopted and driven with a plan for how do we implement. So what do you think? What are your thoughts? What are your questions? Oh, Kelly.
I was just wondering, so you said that we're very close to getting to a place where the portrait is completed and then we move on to implementation. Does this come with an implementation plan, or is that for people to figure out as they kind of, build the plane as they fly?
Yeah, so it's a conversation for Melissa and I to have, but let me talk about what this process typically would include next. So what my current contract, sort of where it wraps, is getting feedback on this trip from individual teachers, of course, coming back to you all and administration and community leaders, looping back. How are we feeling about where we've landed? And this incorporating all the various voices. This will wrap up with my writing up a memo to Melissa and the leadership to say, okay, this is what I've observed and what I would recommend for implementation. So here's my recommendation. I will preview for you one of the major piece, Melissa, that will go into that memo for you. Typically, what happens that is best is if you have an internal team who owns this and takes a look, and there are a couple of ways to go about it. That internal team should be diverse. So it wouldn't just be the leadership team, right? It would be sort of who has a lot of sway and enthusiasm that can coalesce a school and move it forward. That could include people from this committee. In fact, I think that it should at least have one or two people. But that group then really should identify a couple of things. The first recommendation for me is, what are you already doing that is aligned to this? So if we agree this is what we're heading in, then it's a little bit of a lowercase a audit of all of the things that I think about this as a spectrum from hurt to help. Here are things we're doing that actually get in the way, maybe some discipline policies or a bell schedule, or what gets in the way from our ability to do this. But then what are the activities, Makihiki, our partnership with Kumano Ikeala, any mentor, the Menehune Club, what are things that are happening that are really helping us move in this direction? And then having an important conversation about where that lands. So that's kind of an inventory related to the portrait. And then that core group deciding on what are the 2 or 3 structural shifts to focus on. So let's say if it was, I know I'm picking a hot issue, but for sake of ease, the bell schedule. Like, we're never going to fully get there until we figure out this part of the bell schedule. And that may not be it. I'm just pulling that out. Or needing staff, not having enough staff to take on clubs, or not being able to compensate, right? There are structural things that it would take to move. So figuring out the 2 or 3 pieces, then also figuring out what is the professional development that would be needed to move in this direction. So you've got sort of your early champions and those pieces. So that group should come up with the inventory and then the implementation plan. Now, I will be honest and say, I would love to be able to continue with the school community to provide coaching and support in that process. That's up to Melissa and her team. That's up to you all and the resources that are available. The most important caution and recommendation I have moving forward for this whole process is the next step has to be owned inside of the school with inclusion, right, for continued voices. That I'm a big believer that lack of clarity can breed confusion, and too much confusion can breed contempt, especially when you're tired and stressed and stretched. So if this just looks like a new initiative that's coming on top of what the staff are doing already, it's not going to go far, right? But if it's internally derived as a next step of like, okay, here's what we have, here's where we're going, I think that will be important. The other caution I would have, or recommendation, again, I'm previewing things I'll be talking to Melissa about and sharing with Melissa, is that these conversations about the portrait, if this becomes the direction heading in, should become, they should increase pretty significantly in frequency, because this is, you know, what you're heading toward. So I know I gave you more information than you asked for, but this, in this contract, I'm not able to provide the implementation plan, and I think it should be staff derived. I'm here for you all if you decide, and if Melissa and the team decide to want continued coaching and support to support an internal team, and an internal team driving this would be my recommendation, the inventory, and then the internal team. So Kelly, I'd be curious just to stay with you for a second. Is there anything that, given your background, that you would want to add into that kind of process, given this sort of nexus point that the school is at with this?
I think, you know, as we consider, you know, that kind of, like you said, like high level, this is what we see as the guiding North Star, tapping into current champions, and I couldn't agree more that helping staff already access and elevate the work that's already being done, I think is how you gain like a forward momentum and increase the trajectory of the work. I think that's, you know, if you're looking at recommendations, that would be like the first part of it, right? Like, how do we help teachers and staff realize these are the X, Y, and Z that's already happening? And I think the second part of that would also be, how do we help staff, teaching staff, instructional staff, and non-instructional staff really wrap around or wrap their heads around how does this make their lives in terms of like their professional lives easier and better, right? How does this make things feel like I'm happy to go to work every morning because we do what I love, and as opposed to it's my job and I walk in and I walk out and it's just a job. So I think it's that helping, maybe using the portrait as a way to shift climate and culture from both the student perspective, what do we see for our children, but also from the adult perspective and their role in creating the climate and culture that reinforces the ability to thrive in learning and life.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that answered your question.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's right. And I think I was talking earlier today to somebody about it as a conversion experience. Sometimes it's a little bit of fake it till you make it. That if the focus is there and there are more experiences and opportunities where the lights for kids come on, like it's just a funner, better, more positive experience when these pieces are in place, and that's good for the adults and for the kids. Yeah, Ryan.
As you were talking, I was just kind of linked into currently at work, we're hiring a variety of positions. And as you went through these different corners on the portrait, I just realized how much of those things we're looking for in those candidates. So a lot of these things that you're calling out are what we're looking for in today's workplace. And I contrast that. I think a lot of times, especially as parents, we get maybe hung up on, for lack of a better word, I think like just the strict academic side of things, but we forget that, you know, when they leave and they go forward into the world, there's a whole lot of other axes that they're going to be evaluated on, and that this is a really crucial part for them to develop those capacities and those skills. And Lord knows, as middle schoolers, they need the practice at developing that.
Yeah, so I used to work at the national level with the National Network for Business and Industry Standards and the Business Roundtable. So this, and the US Chamber. So right, the biggest associations of workplaces. And they were constantly talking about these employability skills. And you know, that you often will get hired based on technical skills and fired if these pieces aren't there. That in the workplace, this is what's so needed. What's important about what you said, Ryan, is that when we go back developmentally, this is the time when those things can be really developed, and it's going to pay out dividends for the rest of their long life. If they don't get it in this sort of formative period, and they have a couple of years, but it's 3 years with you, it's 4 years, you know, it's 1 year less than high school. I mean, that's an important thing to consider. It's going to be harder. It's going to be harder for them in high school. It's going to be harder for them later in life. So I'm really glad to hear that. What about Lynn or Julia? I see your faces, or anybody who wants to come off mute who isn't sharing video. Okay, Lynn.
I don't have anything to add. Honestly, it's seeing this portrait shape out the way it has is just really exciting. At our last meeting, I already felt that way. It was just really neat to hear how much of it all aligned with what we said separately from the staff, and how it all just aligned. We were all saying the same thing. So that to me really hit home.
That's awesome. I will tell you, the cultural and community leaders that I've met with to show them this version so far in the trip, so they wouldn't change a thing. There are certainly things that will need to be changed as we get into the realities for the school, but at least the reflection of the starting point seems to feel solid so far. Anything, Julia, that you would add?
I second what Lynn said. I saw a lot of the things that I remember that we talked about in our meeting in here, and yeah, I agree. I think it's really well-rounded and reflects all our voices in there. Yeah,
that's great. Okay, so I will preview for you that the next book that aligns really deeply to this that we talked about the last time we were together comes out at the end of May. So if you want to sneak peek at some of those chapters, because certainly they show up, there is the link. And I think Melissa and I were hoping that at some point there would be time to like get you copies in person. So Melissa, anything that you want to say, both in terms of that and reflecting on this conversation and where we head next?
Well, we can certainly make the book happen when it comes out. I mean, I have a reference as to who's on the meeting tonight. I'm excited to see the book. I have not had an opportunity to meet one-on-one with you after today, right? We're going to do that tomorrow morning, everyone who's on the call right now. And it's inspiring to me. It's also very, for me, very integrated. And I think the plethora and range of voices that are expressed in this vision are just exactly what we need at Waimea Canyon Middle School. I know that we're treading on new ground for the state of Hawaii. State of Hawaii looks a lot at the profile of a high school graduate. So it's inspiring also that hopefully other middle schools also take this adventure with us.
Yes, and I will tell you that there is a colleague of mine who wrote a book called Finding the Magic in Middle School. So he is an expert internationally on middle school. And I made sure I had a conversation with him before coming here to go through this piece and really ensure that it was aligned with everything he knew about middle school. And he's very excited. So we were talking about how is this an opportunity, a model potentially for other middle schools as well. But that's really cool. Well, I know you have a lot to cover and that it's 7 o'clock. I am so grateful to see you, and I'm so sad that we're not in person because Ryan was going to play an instrument and it was going to be amazing, right, Ryan? This just means I have to come back because at some point, Julia, it's going to happen.
Yes, hopefully. I don't know.
Don't forget, what is it? An elephant? I'm like an elephant. Is that right? So it was so good to see you all. And as Melissa said, yeah, the ball is in your court, and I'm here to help and to serve. However that makes sense moving forward, and certainly hope that we get to reconnect again. And if for some reason we don't, what an inspiring process this has been for me to get us to this point. And I'm excited to see how the little seed that gets planted from these conversations can really blossom. So I'm gonna hop off so you can continue your finance and academic plans. I'm sorry that that it's gonna go on longer, but it was good to see everybody.
It's great to have you. Thank you so much for joining us, Stephanie.
Thank you.
See you.
So I apologize that we are over time, but I just thought probably should let her continue to just kind of close out and round out all of that great work that we've been collectively working on through this whole year. So to turn it back over to you, Melissa, let me share my screen.
She continues tomorrow at school to reconnect with some key voices on campus as well. And then Malia and I are meeting at 7:30 tomorrow morning, and then we'll meet again after all of her conversations on campus wrap up. But I know she was also meeting with Kaina Makua and his group, Kamanu, this afternoon, and it's just awe-inspiring, right?
Yes, very. So I'm hoping that everybody that attended also saw the link that Julia dropped in, or the links, I should say, that she dropped in the chat for the academic plan and the financial plans, or plan. But to give you a view of all the words I was kind of describing,
Perfect.
it's not one page. Okay,
No.
it's a lot of words.
Yeah.
So that's why we wanted to give you that link ahead of time, so you might have had an opportunity to review it. But I think I'm going to turn it over to Melissa, and she can give you a good overview and summary of what we've got here.
So this is basically a 180 from what our plans used to look like, right? We have a new superintendent of the state. We have a new Kaz Hamada for Kauai. And as part of Kaz Hamada's initiatives, he released this new plan in January to principals, and he tailored the plans to each grade level. So there's an elementary plan that was released, a middle, and a high school. And so as we know, there's 3 middle schools on Kauai, and these initiatives will look the same categories. As you look at the far left, EA1 means enabling activity. So all of his middle schools on Kauai will have that same enabling activity. Number 1 listed is literacy. Then how you respond to that is unique to the schools, right? So the first one, obviously, as I said already, is enabling activity 1, literacy. It's really aligning, making sure that our curriculum study sync is we already know it's been vetted nationally and it's aligned to standards, but how do we as a staff ensure that we as a whole group of language arts teachers are staying on track within this vetted curriculum, and also embedding it with project-based learning, which is all about standards as well, and also the screener of iReady. And iReady not only represents a screener at our school to find out if every student's making progress, but it's also considered a tier intervention. So that means when you take this particular assessment, it tiers every individual student out to where they need individual assistance, where there may be holes in their understanding and or how they can be promoted further from the current grade level. There's a lot in this particular part also in academic vocabulary. So we're going back and saying the state of Hawaii does use the federal Smarter Balance Assessment as a benchmark for achievement, right? So why not use what we know? So the Smarter Balance Assessment comes out with the released items that you can practice with, as well as a standard vocabulary list. So it's a focus on our data teams turning to those released items, doing a pre-post situation for every student, and then embedding academic language throughout the school year. Okay, enabling activity number 2 is numeracy or mathematics. Very, very similar as the one above. With academic vocabulary, our teachers are using illustrative math with fidelity this school year. Data teams are aligned around released items from the Smarter Balance. And once again, iReady is also a tier intervention as well as the screener. And every school in the state of Hawaii needs to have a screener. The next one is for science, enabling activity science. So basically, the left-hand side represents the big content picture that every school in the state of Hawaii has on their Strive High report. The language arts, the math, and then for us, it's 8th grade science. But of course, it's not just it's 8th grade being tested, but how the curriculum is interwoven from 6 to 7 to promote the concepts within 8th grade. We currently use a curriculum called Amplify. It was released by UC Berkeley as the best middle school aligned next generation standard science curriculum, which we're tested on. We're looking at different options. We've formed a cohort with Chiefus and the math teachers at Waimea Canyon to investigate different options other than Amplify. So that should happen during this school year where we roll over to a different curriculum. What they're finding with Amplify is that there are some language difficulties, and the science teachers actually want to do more labs as opposed to online labs, so actual physical labs. And the same thing with academic vocabulary. They'll be using academic vocabulary across all content, where the social studies elective and science teachers at the end of the school year, the beginning of next school year, will divide up the large bucket of academic vocabulary, and each group will be responsible to make sure that it's introduced and infused within their curriculum. So now if we scroll back up, the second half of this kind of placemat, blue, are the rest of the enabling activities. EA4, enabling activity 4, high instructional strategies. We're going to relook at our strategies as to how we teach. And the teachers will continue to do the Burke learning walks. And then at the beginning of this next school year, they'll come together and choose 2 other large bucket items that everybody will do in the whole school to promote a great instructional strategy. One that's on the table right now is from John Hattie, and it's goal setting, where students set a goal before an assessment, take the assessment, and then reflect back after the assessment is scored and see if they met their goal or not. That tends to really increase achievement. It's a really high-end win for students and teachers when that's implemented. But once again, the faculty has not come to consensus if that's going to be one of the 2 remaining strategies. So that's an ongoing process. For instructional strategy 5, interdisciplinary units, of course, I wanted to put the word PBL first, but I was told put it at the end so that the middle schools look very similar. We do project-based learning. We do project-based learning based on gold standard through a company called PBL Works. By gold standards, there's a separate list of teaching strategies and there's a separate list of planning strategies. And of course, project-based learning always goes and focuses on deeper learning competencies that are based on the basic standards. So what is different for next year for us is that we're going to come around and we're going to go back to teaming, which means that in 6th grade, there'll be 2 teams. There'll be a 6A and a 6B. And your students will have, if you're on 6A, your students will have the same 4 content teachers. Right now, they could have any multiple of teachers, but we're going to go ahead and make smaller learning communities by doing teams again. Teams are really difficult to do in a small school because of population, and very often a teacher of core content, let's give an example, say a math teacher may have to teach both 7th and 8th grade, right? If we don't have the population necessary to only have straight line teachers, which means I only teach 7th or I only teach 8th. So the way we've constructed personnel for next year, it looks like we're going to be able to implement teams again. The staff is very excited about it. And we've actually dedicated every Wednesday meeting to teaming for next year. And then we come to multi-tiered system of support. That includes the PBIS, the rewards for being like a lot of elementary schools say caught being good, right? It's support for positive behavior. It also includes things like Naha Pena Au and tribes, and just really making sure that advisory is as strong as it could be. So for the 2 big items of middle schools on Kauai for next year, the 3 principals came together and we decided we'll focus on teaming, and we'll also focus on advisory to make sure we're doing the best we can in both of those scenarios. And those really kind of tie us back to also some social emotional learning, because advisory is not graded. It's all about your significant adult on campus. And then just interweaving so that we get back to what Stephanie Malia just presented to us. What is our graduate look like? What should it look like? What should we focus on? Long plan, right? College and career is pivotal as far as they're looking more and more the state of Hawaii, not just college and career focus in high school, but how do we flush it down to middle school and even elementary school. So we'll be doing more college and career perspectives. One is that we just offered the students to change an elective to a college and career readiness elective. That one isn't going too good so far. We had not enough to run the class for next year, but we'll go ahead and offer it again as an elective choice the following year. We're changing our transition course, the course that everyone takes from 5th to 6th, to be a college and career focused curriculum, as opposed to just what do we need to do to transition. And then we will continue again next year with a college and career week, and even expanded beyond that. And that's focused through the counselors and a grant from P20. Wow, I've talked a lot. Any questions on any of that? So the blue is just the prior that the teachers were working on. That's identical to what the black is. These are the 4 initiatives and the 6 focuses that Keith Hayashi, our new superintendent, is framing his work around. Real important for us is this is the first time that middle level education has become a key component in the state of Hawaii. So it's real exciting to have a focus of middle level education. Really is very different from high school and very different from elementary. Very often middle school has been just flushed into the secondary bucket. So super exciting, okay, if your passion's middle school, which mine is. Then we go to secondary math, vulnerable populations, K-12 alignment, and of course other school-specific initiatives. So we really have strong representation in 5 of the 6. Then, of course, then there's the 4 pillars that were the initial steps that he introduced coming on as the TA superintendent. Questions? You don't know what to ask, right? There's any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
I was wondering if, like, what are so you talked a lot about how, like, you were talking amongst the middle schools on, how to come up with, like, a good plan that's consistent for all of them. Is there any effort made, like, talking to, like, the 5th grade teachers and also then the 9th grade teachers to kind of connect the school better with the feeder schools and then the high school?
So, yes, there is. So when you come back to school, when your students come back, the school has been operating already for a week, right? Teachers and administrators and professional development happen a good solid week before your students come on campus. So within the beginning of next school year, we're articulating West U as my consultant for math. We're spending 1 whole day articulating with math, and that would be the math teachers meeting with the high school math teachers and help facilitate that conversation. And we're inviting the other half also to articulate with our elementary schools. I don't have a firm confirmation yet on that piece. I do from the high school already. And as far as language arts, Dave Holden is going to be our consultant. He has been working with Mahina Angwe and Waimea High School and pathways and academies for probably 5 or 6 years now. So his knowledge just about Waimea High School and the interactions of our students there, by us being able to have him as our consultant as well, I think it's going to be immeasurable. Just the crossover between the math, where WestU also works at the high school, is already paying off a lot, just knowing how to do that progression. And the P20 grants have a lot of articulation. One project that we do for the last 3 years that the high school has asked us to do is called U Science. And that's like an inventory that students take in 8th grade to see where the aptitudes and interests are before they enter high school. And that follows them up into 9th grade. Transitions for students, which is real important always. We're bringing our fifth graders on campus, April 9th, I think. Is it the 9th? Which is really good because we haven't done that since the last time we brought them in person on campus was like pre-COVID, the year
I
before.
think it's the 6th, April 6th.
April 6th.
Yeah.
We hope to have a parent night, right? And then of course, always for 5th to 6th graders, the first day of school is for 6th graders only and their parents. So we really cherish this transition point. We know it's a huge step going from an elementary where very often you have 1 or 2 teachers into where all of a sudden you may have 7 different teachers, right? So we really want our parents to come to that initial open house, 6th grade only. And that is the best attendance open house on the campus ever, always. Thanks for asking.
It is a lot of information.
It is.
Yeah. But,
Right.
I want to extend opportunity for those that are maybe seeing it for the first time. And I know it's a lot to take in all at once, but if there are any questions or input or discussion that is sought here, if you'd like. Okay. If not, I'm going to move over to give you an opportunity to do a quick overview of sort of the funding that's tied to each of these EAs, Melissa.
So
Trying to make it big for you.
far left, thank you. So on the far left are the enabling activities again, right? Remember the literacy, the math, the science. How this is broken down then is the next column, moving left to right, products and services. It actually says what the school is going to incur or what we are purchasing for next school year. The next column is WSF, that's weighted student formula. So that's money that the school gets for the number of students that we have, right? And then the farthest column over to the right is Title I. We're a Title I school, which means I think our current percentages are around 60% of our families file that they are in a poverty level situation for free or reduced lunch. So those schools, which a lot of our schools are in the United States in general, they get extra money to do additional projects, programs, have additional consultants. So this is basically what we're spending our money on. What is really nice this final year is Casamata has ESSER money, and that's the monies that kind of rolled out, remember, during COVID. You probably heard of ESSER monies a lot. He retained all the third phase of ESSER monies at the district level, and as schools, we applied for different grants and projects to be funded. I haven't heard back on all of my projects, but the majority of my projects are going to be funded, which is great, which means the district will pay for Dave Holden, that articulation piece in LA between ELA, the high school, and us for next year. He'll also work with some curriculum pieces for us. We're going to have like 100 more Chromebooks. We're going to have smart boards for teachers. And I'm still waiting on hearing the results of the social emotional learning that our grant that we put in for. They're a little behind on timeline. So we're also looking at a lot of data pieces. Why are our students rating the school not so favorably as far as feeling safe there? So we have to respond to why that's happening, right? It's dropped from 62 to 52 to 38. And we have to do something about that, because we all know that students have to feel safe and secure in order to learn, in order to even take the next step to building relationships and relevancy and the rigor that we really need to have in middle school. So any questions on any of the funding? Once again, the district's being very generous with funding. So this was really nice for us to be able to do this. The technology, the one-to-one, that's 75,000 on EA7. That's the new Chromebooks that we buy every year for the sixth graders. So every sixth grader coming to campus gets a brand new Chromebook. The expectation is they keep it and maintain it until they graduate from us in 8th grade. Any questions? Any of the products and services you want a little bit more explanation about?
Yes, I see the new teacher stipends. Is that like something that you give like as an incentive for teachers to come, or what? Like what's?
So any new teacher at Waimea Canyon Middle School, we ask them to do 3 days of project-based learning before they step foot on campus. Right, that's a virtual program that we pay for them, so that when we talk about project-based learning, we're all talking the same language. We're all talking the same about it has to be aligned with standards. Then also we have our new teachers come on. In the past, we've been able to do like a couple of days, where one day is what is even tribes? What's our umbrella of our agreements on campus? What does it mean to be in middle school? What do you know about middle school learners, right? And we go through the different pieces that my returning teachers have and have been trained on, right? But someone brand new may not know that. It includes very mechanical things like, how do you call a sub, right? How do you put that into the system? Which lounges do I use, right? That very technical. And then the very umbrella, we do a piece with Mount Pena Al with them as well. And then in the past, we've had also the luxury of being able to have them work in the Lohi for half a day with Kaina, just to get them kind of grounded into the place where they are and the community of Waimea. That by far is the best part of the stipend days. They all love that. And they get to go out in the community and talk and work in the taro patch. And then one other piece we do is we have 2 teachers on campus come and do something called Talk Story. They introduce our new teachers to general words like, what does it mean when someone says pow or aloha or mahalo, right? Just basics that'll make new teachers feel more comfortable on our campus. Kauai District also has days that they fund where they get all the new teachers on Kauai together and try to form a cohort, so you have some automatic friends off campus as well. A stipend is about $180 a day for a teacher. Too much information, right, Julia?
Oh, good. Thank you. That's great.
Are there any questions? Okay. Thank you
Oh,
so much,
lots.
Melissa.
Right, that's a lot. Thank you, Lynn.
Okay, we're almost there. I just got one slide, announcements. It covers a lot of the things that Julia was showing on screen at the beginning of this meeting. Just so that you're aware, our next SCC meeting is on April 6th from 4 to 5. It's also virtual. Everyone's always welcome to attend any SCC meeting, whether you're a member or not. So it's always open to all to attend, to participate. The 3 events that Julia mentioned at the beginning of this meeting is the movie night and the SEL panel discussion on April 28th. It is going to be Teacher Appreciation Week, May 8th through 12th, and the exhibition of our student projects, which I know the students are very proud to share the projects they've been working on all year. That happens on May 16th. So those are key dates to kind of jot down and participate in the future. And that is it. Any questions before we adjourn?
Can I just really promo, please, everybody come to exhibition. It's the students are really excited about it. They're very happy to present their projects, and we just really need an audience. So if at all possible, we double, triple check. There's no conflict with any high school event on the west side or any elementary event. So please come on out to exhibition. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for being here this evening. I'm glad we could still meet even with this weather. Thank goodness for Zoom and other methods of virtual meeting. So I will officially adjourn this meeting at 7:28. It doesn't look like I have any SEC. Oh, Ryan's here. Okay, well, I move to adjourn at 7:28 p.m. If you can second me, Ryan.
I second.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Lynn.
Everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Lynn. Are we good?
We're good, ma'am. Thank you very much.
And then
Sorry I went
eventually-
over time.
No, that's fine. I would love to get that document signed off with